Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Cold, and right now I am waterboarding my pet while I tell you all about my ranking of the 20 now final bosses of each world, and let's just go ahead and start. No more of that intro. Well, actually, before we get into the video, I wanted to give a quick shout out to It's Nix. She made a neat little PvP video where she tried out some Master League PvP, and I thought it was pretty good. It was a pretty funny video, really entertaining. I recommend y'all check her out and tell her Ice Cold sent you. On to the video. So as you might have guessed, the 20th and last place on the list is the Zafars Starburst Spiders. There's a few entries on this list where there were better fights that came before the final fight within the same dungeon, leaving fights like this one to be kind of underwhelming. The Spectral Guardians in the second fight symbolized all the peoples of Zafaria. They had the elephant, lion, gorilla, and zebra, I believe. It's been a minute since I've done Mirror Lake, but they were there. And the fight had a couple interesting cheats to go with that. But the spiders, on the other hand, were just basic Morganth minions, meant to slow us down with no real story relevance, so they're in easy last place. After an unnecessarily long walk, we arrived at the Crystal Caves in Avalon, which is where the black and white dragons are located. These are the final bosses of Avalon, as opposed to the Pendragon, which is much more memorable. And I mean, if only the Pendragon were the final fight of Avalon. You know, he had so much story significance, but the real final boss just ended up being these two dragons that you had to beat to be able to cure Artorias with, I think, some branch that you find in here somewhere. I don't even know. It was still a great end of the world with the Keep of Ganelon, but as a final boss, these were just kind of underwhelming. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 seconds to look away from the screen. 3, 2, 1. Alright. For number 18 on the list, we have Mitha in the Trial of the Spheres in Celestia. Celestia didn't really have any good options for a final boss, so they went with the Trial of the Spheres, which felt honestly kind of shoehorned into the end of the story. And then to the writer's credit, Mitha was a better final boss than Big Salgio out in the Chancel, but she doesn't really have any story significance. She does have the most kick-ass chamber area in all of Celestia, though, so there's that. Coming in 17th on the list is the Eon of Atavis in the Nucleus Gallery Novus. And for what it's worth, I loved what little we saw Manticore, but I'm really not sure what the writers were going for when they made this fight the last one of the world. Probably just another Celestia situation where they lacked a good overarching villain, and Dasein wasn't mad enough at us yet, so they went with what they had. The final boss of the fourth arc is really just glorified pirate ship combat, for the moment anyway. Once the Nightmare drops, I'm sure there will be a much better final boss for Wallaroo and the fourth arc as a whole, but for now this felt a bit gimmicky and the main focus of Wallaroo wasn't on the whole Spiral War thing. But it was nice to have the heroes of Lemuria back, but this still wasn't a great closer to Wallaroo. We could see a better final boss in the Nightmare though, once that comes around in January. In 15th place, we have the final boss of Mushu being the Jade Oni. There's definitely some story significance with the Oni and Mushu, and I like the idea that the Emperor was cursed to turn into the Jade Oni if he was ever cured. It's vaguely like the Pendragon story, but with none of the setup, so there's that. It was kind of just an, oh damn, that really just happened type thing. It was cool, but better final bosses exist. In 14th place, we have Malister the Undying in Jabalba as Tekka. This would honestly be so much higher, maybe even higher than Dragonspire Malister if they just leaned into raising the suspense as to who Morganth's Dark Servant really was. They dropped a few hints throughout the world, but the big reveal at the end was more of a they really brought him back type thing, rather than being a, ooh, the Dark Servant is the only unresolved factor in this story, who could it be type thing. And then having the story give you a few clues along the way. I think the only real clue was toward the beginning of the world where I think you open a sarcophagus maybe, I don't know, but it was something like that. For what it's worth though, the fight itself is rather unique and I like that about it. 13th place is going to be Lord Nightshade here in the Haunted Cave in Wizard City. As goofy as the news story is, it gives Nightshade some much needed story relevance. He's basically the big guy controlling all of the undead in Wizard City, and he's also one of Malister's top henchmen. We did learn that in the new story. That said, there's not much build up to him. We know he's the guy we're after in Wizard City after we finish the 3 streets, but that's kind of about it. I feel like the only way they could really improve on this is if they, name dropped him a little earlier, but I still think he is a good end of world boss. So Randolph Spellshine is 12th on the list here, and this is the final quote-unquote boss of Wisteria, because he does technically come after Lord Bramble. He's got underwhelming cheats, and you're kind of able to kick his ass round 2 at the appropriate level if you have Feint, but the cathartic feeling of beating him after he talked all that shit really brings him up a good few spots. Rounding out the bottom half, we have Crocopatra, the final boss of Crocotopia. I think there was sufficient build-up to her, and her role in the story was good. I mostly just like the others more. We're kind of at the point where I don't see many problems with each of these fights. Coming in 10th place, finally getting to the top half. Do you mind? Malister's involvement with Meowiarty throughout the world gave him some more character, so when we finally fought him at the very top of Big Ben, it was suspenseful and a good fight with the Agony Wraith thrown in there as well. The fight itself was a bit one-dimensional, but from a story perspective, it couldn't really have gotten any better. I think they did a good job of executing this one. In 9th place, we have Morganth, being the final boss of Chrysalis. From an overarching story perspective, this was a climactic ending to Arc 2, especially with Spider over there getting brought in. But if Morganth had her own dungeon, maybe at the end of the galleries over there, I feel like it would be much better from like a storyline POV. But, at least she's a quick farm, right? In 8th place, we have Odin Stormfather and the other Coven Ravens here in Ravenscar Grizzleheim. And to me, the Coven plot was an interesting one. You knew that they were the villains throughout the story, and the plot points along the way really set up this finale with you going against the Coven. 4 bosses at once, and I'm sure they would have done more if they could have, which made this fight challenging, and it really felt like a good finale. In 7th place, we have the Sons of Ymir in Nastron Wintertusk, and it's basically just everything I said before. But the stakes were way higher, and they had a kick-ass dungeon to go along before it. Coming in 6th, we have the Heroes of Lemuria here in Telos. And I honestly loved all 8 heroes, and having them be the final bosses in the only 8v4 fight in the entire game made for some seriously great content. I think the devs really pushed the boundaries with all of these, and I think it paid off. It is a little sudden, but their reason for turning made complete sense and showed their over-ambitious character flaws, looking at you, Quartermain. Depending on how you see it, you can see that they have a point, which puts them in that morally gray area, which, I'll be honest, I'm kind of a big fan of that trope. But yeah, they wanted to use the world synthesizer to just get rid of Lemuria, because it was kind of not meant to be here, but it is, and so we just sort of had to stop them. But I don't know, they have a good point or two, but the final fight honestly is one of the most creative things they've ever done, with all 8 of the heroes fighting the wizard team, which I thought was really cool. Oh, you love to see that, don't you? The context you get after the fight against the Aberrant Paradox here in Caramel, you get the context in the Lemuria story, and that really gives this fight its flair. You find out that it was actually Dasein that you were fighting. Well, that's kind of up close and personal, thank you very much. And that he didn't know any better, and he just wanted to see the everything after being exposed to it at the end of Imperia when the wizard becomes the Divine Paradox. The fight itself is also pretty unique, summoning waves of minions and putting up the buff and debuff bubbles. And I'd argue this is the hardest final boss for the appropriate level in the 4th arc, so it gets the difficulty point as well. So with the rat in Horizon Hold Polaris, I think this is really, really great. I mean, just look at the scenery team. The whole story builds up to a fight with Rasputin, and you find out along the way that he's actually Spider's son, the Rat, and he's one of the most involved final bosses with the world storyline, and in my opinion, that is a hallmark of a good boss. The difficulty is still pretty high, and it's very hard to solo at the appropriate level, and I think for those reasons, it definitely deserves this spot. So the final boss of Mirage comes in here at number 3, and with Grandfather Spider, because he is the final boss of Mirage, I think he is sufficiently difficult, and he's the main villain, I guess, in quotes, of this arc. and you can't really go wrong with this fight. There's a lot of cool mechanics going on, and its significance in the storyline is massive. The plot twist that came after you fought the Scorpion was honestly crazy, and there was a lot of build-up leading to the fight, and he really made it personal. It gave us the opportunity to have a fair fight, and in my eyes, that makes him the best arc villain so far. And the fight itself was honestly great. So second place here is the Ether Titan in Husk Imperia, and honestly man, just the idea of becoming a giant, extremely overpowered version of ourselves and mercilessly kicking this ether-infused Titan's ass up and down the street is totally badass. And the spells being tailored to each school, plus using a triple spell, is just insane on all levels, and this genuinely I think is my favorite fight in the game. The story significance is also huge, as the Titan attacks right when Spider and Raven are about to reconcile, so it's you, imbued with a Paradox Essence, a Light and Shadow, versus the Force that could just straight up end the Spiral on a whim. It's truly a badass moment in Wiz. Hopefully we get something like that again, but it probably won't happen for a while. Unless the Nightmare brings that element back, which I hope it does. And at the very top spot, we have Malister Drake in the Crown of Fire Dragon Spire. And this one's self-explanatory. The entire dungeon leading up to this gave off that eerie feel, and the fight itself is a classic. All the setup of the first arc leads directly to this, and it's a crowning moment in your wizard's journey. You finally bring him down, for now at least, and you become the savior of the Spiral. And there's a reason why Arc 1's got a charm to it that the others don't, and a compelling villain coupled with great writing, minus New Wizard City, really make it what it is. I may like other fights more as standalones, but when it comes to final bosses, the original Malister Drake is king. Except for his Darkmoor version, which if I was including the 4 dungeons here, that would be the easiest number 1 of my life. But the point stands. Well, that is going to wrap up my ranking. This may change once the Nightmare comes out in January, but I guess we'll just have to see. Moment in. Thank y'all for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. And I will see y'all in the next one. Peace out, guys.